Welcome to the Cup of Nurses podcast.
What's up, guys? So, Cup of Nurses podcast. We're your hosts, Matt Sartrick and myself, Peter Fendera. It's a podcast where we tackle current health news and hot nurse topics, one conversation at a time.
Welcome, guys. Thank you for being on the show and listening. Subscribe if you haven't. Today we have a special guest, Jake Greczek. He is a PCU surgical nurse in UCSD, right? Mm-hmm. And prior to his experience there, where he travel nursed for 9 months, he was in a pulmonary step-down unit at Northwestern, and as well in Northwestern, he was an IVF fertility reproductive nurse, where I'm kind of curious about how that kind of goes and the experience there. So we're excited about that. Big things for us, we have the travel nursing checklist, which is finally out, guys. So if you guys are curious about this, go on cupofnurses.com, scroll down a little bit, click the download. It's a free guide, and it gives you the ins and outs of how to become a travel nurse, because a lot of people don't know how to travel and become a nurse. So check that out. So Jake, tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I am a 28-year-old nurse from Chicago, and I lived here my whole life up until about 9 months ago when I moved to California to travel nurse. But prior to that, I worked at Northwestern, like you said, on pulmonary unit. It was pulmonary step down. We had lots of trachs and vents, and I remember like being fresh out of nursing school, and it was probably 3 weeks in, and I was like, what did I get myself into? I feel like most nurses think that probably the first few weeks of orientation, but I remember it being a really intense feeling. Like I thought maybe I had to switch units or switch hospitals because it was just so many trachs and vents. Everyone was mucus plugging. Not everyone, the unit wasn't up to par with like continuous monitors. So not everyone was on continuous O2 sats. And that's like the biggest thing with pulmonary, right? So you just never knew when someone was going to code. And I remember, and it wasn't just me, my coworkers too would pray like every night shift we were going to work, everyone was like, please no code, please no code. And because almost every other night we had one or a rapid response. It's just a lot.
And it's crazy with all that anticipation, like before work, like, you know, like you start your shift at 7 o'clock or at 6, but then like 4 o'clock hits, you're like, damn, I gotta go and work a couple hours. I wonder how it's gonna be. I wonder what's gonna happen today.
For sure. It's like it's pretty much having the Sunday scaries every single day of the week, prior to every shift. And it's some of it has still stayed with me. I like notice, even though like my working conditions are so much better in California, I've noticed that like there's still a little anxiety anticipating what's going to come with every shift. Because you just don't know what you're walking, especially if you've been gone for a few days, you just don't know what you're walking into.
And we as nurses also, we have like this little don't jinx it, don't say the shift is going good when it's like 3 a.m. because something might happen. So I feel like we're always like so superstitious about things.
For sure.
Even about like the full moon, right?
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah,
okay.
I agree. I didn't believe the full moon superstition until I started working, and now I dread it.
Did you ever have a crazy shift working a full moon?
Almost all of them, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned about like the whole trach thing, because when I was in the ICU, when I was a new grad, I'm sorry, not even a new grad, when I was a nursing student, when I was in the ICU, my first day there, I got a patient with a trach, and when she was coughing and like when her eyes were opening up and her eyes were watery, I was in the room like just shitting my pants. Yeah. So I didn't know what to do. I'm just kind of like holding her hand. So then I just go and get the nurse, and she's like teaching me how to suction because I had no idea how any of that things.
1000%. I think like we were always short on the pulmonary step down because no one wanted to work there. And anytime we got a floater who would come, it was like it was hell because every floater no one wanted to float to our unit. But the good thing is like at least when I was charged, I would always avoid giving the floats the trach patients. Right. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know what about trachs or airways. It's kind of like anxiety provoking, I feel like, for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, super anxiety because, you know, you could be coming to work and then you walk into a patient suffocating, you know, and they have a trach, so they're not talking, and it's like their oral airway is fine, but their trachea cavity is completely occluded, and you gotta suction them. You get
1000%
mucus plug or whatever.
Or you have to like put like sterile water in there to like break up the mucus, right, and then suction it. It could be a number of things. One thing I did learn very quickly though on working on that unit is like when the patient is coughing, you never want to walk in front of their bed because like the mucus would literally.
You ever had one dislodging?
All the way like to the whiteboard. People would like. You just never know.
That's gross.
Yeah. Or you never bend in front of the trach when you're suctioning it because like if it comes out. I worked with 2 nurses who were suctioning a trach, and they were like bending over, and the patient coughed into their eyes.
Wow.
And the patient was HIV positive. So it's like it's mucosa, right? So there's a small, very, very small chance, but they had to go on all those antivirals after. Yeah, and my girl, like, this was when I first started working, and one of my friends she was like jaundice from all the antivirals because she had to take it for 30 days.
It's crazy. Like the hardest thing for me in nursing is respiratory secretions. Like I could deal with like shit, I could deal with blood and like guts and people dying, but like respiratory secretion, when like they're like the gurgling sound is just so gross, but it's really satisfying when you suction them and they sound clear. It's really satisfying, but just the fact that like seeing that like loogie or seeing that like mucus is always grossing me out all the time.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
Just never get used to it.
So to summarize the episode we're going to talk about today, with Jake, we're going to talk about suicide in nursing, something we're very passionate about, which is a nurse-patient ratio, which in California is the only state in the United States that passed legislations for it. And then we're going to get to know him a little bit, his travel nursing experience, and him in general being a male nurse and seeing how that kind of plays and all that.
Yeah.
So go ahead, man.
So suicide in the general public has been on like a consistent rise for the past like 10, 15 years, but a lot of times people neglect to look at specific areas where suicide is more prevalent, like in the nursing field. Nursing compared to general public for males and females, it's almost 30% higher than the average person. So women that are nurses and men that are also nurses, they have a 30% higher chance of committing suicide compared to the general public, which is very unfortunate, and a lot of that's attributed to just a stressful environment. Coming into work, like Jake said, unsure of what's going to happen, what you're going to walk into, and it's really scary, and it's taking a toll on nurses. Nurses are burning out quicker, and they just don't want to come back to work. And it's very important because we have a giant nursing shortage. People are starting to retire, and new nurses are completing school, and they're going into work, but then they're leaving their profession within the first year or the first 6 months. I believe like 1 out of 5 new nurses leaves nursing within the first year of their career, which is very sad and very unfortunate. And a lot of that has to be attributed to their stress, and worst case scenario, we don't want them committing suicide, so we gotta kind of address those topics.
Jake, have you ever like thought about leaving nursing, like your first 6 months and just dealing with all this trach and working on the pulmonary unit?
I don't think I have ever considered leaving nursing altogether.
Okay.
The reason I went into nursing is because my mom was diagnosed with cancer in 2005, and she battled for just over 11 years before she passed. And I think I knew I was going to do something in healthcare ultimately. So I don't think I've ever considered leaving nursing, but I definitely considered leaving that unit. And to be honest, when you guys first told me that we were going to talk a little bit about suicide in nursing, I was a little nervous because I wasn't quite sure that I had anything to contribute to the topic. But I do have to say, when it comes to things you see in the hospital, for a long time I was able to compartmentalize all those things, and I just really thought, like, the things I see in the hospital versus when I go home, you just can kind of separate the two, right? You leave work at work.
Yeah.
And I think really this year, this is my 3rd year in nursing, and like I really think this year started catching up with me, which is why I took this month off to come home. I just like needed a mental health break from hospital. So I work at a county hospital in San Diego, where we get all the jail hold and a lot of homeless population.
Okay.
So I think it just like mentally takes a toll. I think on top of that, this last May, I remember going through like a little depression, a mini depression, maybe like it lasted like maybe a month. I remember calling my friend, and I was just talking about like, nothing is wrong in my life. He was like, I just talked to you a month ago, and you were like the happiest you've ever been. I was like, you're right, I am happy, and everything in my life is going great, but it's the stuff you see at the hospital. And I remember like we had a patient who had just had 2 BKs. She had 2 bilateral below the knee amputations. Medically, they had already pretty much done everything they could for her, but she didn't speak English, and she had dementia. She was confused, and she was incontinent. So this woman just had 2 BKs, and they needed to turn over the room. So they were like, hey, we need you to discharge her, put her in a cab. We have waivers for cabs out in San Diego. They're like, put her in cab, give the cab the waiver, and get her to where she needs to go. And so I looked up her address, and she lived over an hour away. I was like, dude, this woman is going to pee in the back seat of the cab. The cab driver is going to kick her out to the side of the road. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't have a cell phone. Wow. And like, who's going to get her? So I like highly advocated for her. I was like, we're going to keep her until tomorrow, until her family could get her. And it's just stuff like that. I think those things kind of take a toll on you, whether it's like the hospital administration or if it's the things you see in the hospital. I think just general burnout comes from all different directions for nurses, and it's tough.
And like Jake, you experience like the emotional burnout there, right? Like that you're just advocating for your patient. You have to go out your way to like advocate for her just so she doesn't, leave the hospital with these shitty conditions. And that's not the only thing that we get abuse from, which is the emotional abuse from everything. It's also physicians, right? And it's also on a lateral level, just like you mentioned before, from the nurses themselves that could contribute what we're experiencing an increase in suicide in general, but also more prevalent in nurses.
Right.
So that it's interesting because the suicide rate has increased by 28% since World War II. And that's like, how many decades ago? We're going to talk about 5 decades. And we have to ask ourselves, why are nurses more like
susceptible
to this?
Yeah.
Do you think it's like the 8-hour to 12-hour shift? Do you think that makes a difference?
That's a good question. I personally don't. I think whoever floats your boat. Like if some nurses want to work 8s, I'm happy for them, and some want to work 12. I understand why if general legislation was passed for all nurses to have to work 8s, I don't think I could. I would leave nursing for sure. I don't think even though everyone works an 8-hour day, Monday through Friday, right? Or say, obviously we'd have different shifts, right? Because we probably have work like Tuesday through Saturday or Wednesday through Sunday, right? Because the hospital never shuts down. Yeah. But if I had to work 5 8s a week, there's something about nursing that's just so emotionally exhausting and physically exhausting that I'd rather stay a few hours extra on a longer shift and get it done and have a day to myself to recover than to do it 8 days out, like 8 days in a row. Because if you think about like on a Wednesday, you're like, holy shit, I still have 2 more of this to go. I'd rather just do the 12s. But I don't know if that contributes. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, like I'm the same way. I prefer 12-hour shifts over like the 8-hour shifts because you work less days of the week, and I feel like I'm always a little anxious before I go into work, and I'd rather be anxious for 3 out of the 7 days out of the week compared to like the 5 or the 4, which will be required for an 8-hour shift. But I did this research online, and it shows that nurses are more exhausted doing 12-hour shifts compared to 8s. And I know there's some studies that are done that productivity and safety in work kind of topples down after 8 hours
for sure
of work. But I feel like, but that was just kind of a study done on like a general. It wasn't a nursing related study. It was general like a marketing agency or some kind of a company was doing that study. But I feel like for nurses, it's like a different type of work. It's a different job for the most part. It's more emotional, and I feel like 12 hours is probably ideal.
So if we did 8 hours, you have to think about it this way, then we'd have 3 different shifts, right, per day. So now you don't just have 2 nurses in someone's life, you have 3 different nurses in one patient's life. And so the continuity of care is kind of broken up a little bit.
And that's what we noticed in Oakland, because that travel nursing contract was 8-ish shifts, and it was only 4 days a week. But those 4 8s, I was dreading working 4 days a week. You like your 3s, you like your 4 days off. And we noticed the shifts were like 11 to 3. I'm sorry, 11 to 7, and then those 7 to 3, and then 3 to 11. And you can tell right away the difference in care where one nurse forgets to say something, and your shift is so short, you're not able to read through the notes and take care of the patient like the way you should.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are missed. And another thing that I noticed is accountability. So if you know that nurse is coming back, she expects you to get stuff done or whatever was missed. Sometimes you could just throw the stuff on a nurse and you're not going to see her in the next shift because there's going to be another nurse taking care of her. That accountability is not there.
Right.
So that's one thing I noticed, that 8-hour shifts are probably not good for nurses.
And some nurses do have to work 8 hours, right, in clinics, or except for when I worked IVF, I did 8 hours. So if it floats your boat and you prefer it, then more power to you. I do have to say, right, Senator Walsh was pushing for I think back when she made that comment about nurses playing cards, she also was pushing for 8-hour days, saying that nurses are too tired working 12-hour shifts. And yeah, I agree. I do think research shows that productivity, like you said, lessens after the 8-hour point, but that's why breaks are so important, right? Which not every nurse gets, and we'll talk about that too.
Yeah. Before we jump into the ratios, you seem like a very healthy individual that copes fairly well, and I'm sorry what happened to your mother, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of things in the hospital that touch your heart. So how do you what's the best way you would give advice if someone was depressed or sad or struggling at work? how would you tell them to cope with certain things? How do you cope as an individual outside of work?
That's a good point. I think you definitely need someone to talk to. I think people who keep it bottled up inside are it's going to come out one way or another. Just depends on how long you're going to hold it in. And if it doesn't come out verbally, it's going to come out in some other way. You're just going to be tired all the time. I just think you need to have like an emotional support team
System.
And it has, whether it's friends or family, you have to be able to talk to someone. And then I think what really helped me is just being happy for what I had, right? I know that although I can't fix everything that's happening to people in the hospital and there are unfortunate circumstances, you can be happy that these things aren't happening to you and we're still healthy and we can walk and we're healthy enough to help other people, so why not do it? And then working out, honestly, I think when I always have been into like working out, but really when I moved to California, I started putting in the time, and now I'm doing like 6 days a week. I'm trying to eat healthier. I think just being physically active reduces stress and anxiety overall, no matter what. There's no argument against it. Research just shows that
it's like an emotional release, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you any kind of special diets that you're currently doing, or?
I try to eat generally healthy, but I think going, and this is again personal opinion, I know it's not a popular opinion, I think going to any extreme, like if you want to try keto, if you want to try intermittent fasting, that's fine. But I think doing anything too extreme is not healthy. I think everything in moderation. And I also think if you're going to completely cut out one thing out of your diet, it's just going to come back to haunt you, right? Because then one day you're going to slip and you're going to binge on that thing. Yeah. So if you can just do everything in moderation, like nowadays, like for example, today I had a pulled pork sandwich. I hadn't had one in a long time. So instead of having like I just took off the top bun. I still had the bottom bun with the pulled pork, but you just make like adjustments.
You make adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah, and instead of having the whole piece of dessert after dinner with my family, like we only got one piece and then all 6 of us shared it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You want to jump into nurse-patient ratios?
Yeah.
Which is like the topic that we would really like to discuss. And a lot of people don't know that are like non-nurses. Like I feel like we're fighting like this invisible war between the hospital and nurses are fighting amongst each other. And like as healthcare is increasing, our grid is getting more, strict. Like for example, we don't have a tech on nights. Then they kind of take away a nurse. You need an extra 2 patients before a nurse comes on, and then we're getting the stress just to cut costs, and we're always getting the short end of the stick. And
you guys never have a tech on nights, huh?
No.
Well, at my hospital we do.
Okay.
In our ICU, we do not have a tech on nights.
Yikes. Yeah. We didn't have one on the pulmonary step-down I worked on. We had someone who came in at 5 a.m. just to do 6 a.m. vitals, and we each had 4 or 5 patients, and she would never do all the, like we had 30 beds, right? The tech would only do 2 of your 4 patients, so you still had to do the other 2, but it's like, if you're coming in early just to do vitals, like, come on. Just like...
Yeah, and that's the problem with these ratios and cutting costs is like you don't have a tech, and for example, sometimes I can't find a nurse on the unit, and I'm turning the patient myself, stuffing the pillow, and I'm not using good, like, let's just say mobility to do this, and you could hurt yourself, and we just don't have the manpower to take care of these patients effectively sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think, like, using cost-cutting techniques to cut staff is probably, like, the worst thing you could do. Because first of all, you're supposed to staff by acuity, and second of all, if you don't have enough staff to cover the amount of patients, the nurses are going to get overworked. Everyone else is getting overworked, and the load gets dumped on the nurses, which is very unfair, which obviously impacts patient satisfaction and patient care, because we're probably not going to go in there to do the proper teachings. We're just going to come in and come out, not really converse with the patient, not develop like a bond. So only person that suffers in the long run is the patient. So short-term gains are, you're saving money today by cutting staff, but long term, you're going to probably have that patient come back or not get the full education and not get their full benefit of their hospital stay. And then, patients come back every month. You see them for fluid overload again because they're not taking their Lasix, or no one ever told them to cut down on their salt. And it only does like devastating effects long term.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think this is a woe is me situation. I don't think nurses are, oh, woe is me, like we need more staff because we were just lazy. I don't think nurses are lazy at all. I think the one resource that is limitless and endless is the professional medical ethic of nurses and doctors. And I think hospital systems it's just corporate America, and they're so overly corporatized right now with like hospital mergers, and like everything's trying to be streamlined.
Yep.
So when you start to function like a factory, you kind of prey on the medical ethic of us or like people, why we went into nursing, right? You went into nursing to become a better person or to make a difference in someone's life, and hospitals know that you're not going to drop the ball, because if you're dropping the ball, that means putting a patient in danger or in harm. And patient safety, right? Nursing school is always pushing patient safety first, patient safety.
Nursing
and so right, and so we're not going to ever harm our patients. So if that means staying later to chart or staying later to fix, a patient who just wet themselves at change of shift, you're going to do it because that's the right thing to do. And hospitals know this, and so they know that this is a limitless resource that they're going to go ahead, and if they drop 30 more things on your EMR that you have to do on your electronic medical record, they're going to do it because the nurses will stay and they're going to do it. And like you said, you can't walk out on your patient. So it's just kind of an unfortunate scenario. I think mandated patient ratios are super important. I think my life has changed dramatically as a nurse from working in Chicago to working in California.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that California is the only state that through legislation passed the ratio for the ICU, which is usually 1 to 2.
One nurse to 2 patients.
Yes. Med-surg is 1 to 5, I believe. So they're the only state that actually did this.
And this was in 2004.
2004.
So we're 15 years later down the line, and the only other state to have even tried or to touch it is Massachusetts. And they didn't even get all the units. They only have the ICU, which is 1 nurse to 2 patients. And then this last November, they tried to push it for all the other units, and Massachusetts voters voted against it. And I don't think it's necessarily the voters who are opposing it. I think the AHA, which is the American Hospital Association, is 1,000% behind opposing this and influencing voters to vote no, because the AHA doesn't want to lose money. And for them, they think, right, like you said, overall it's it's too much money for them to hire more nurses, because it's millions of dollars to hire more nurses to meet the ratios, right? But at the end of the day, wouldn't you want your family member to go somewhere where it's appropriately staffed and mortality rates fall? And the benefit of California having pushed this in 2004 is that it's been so long, so now we have a lot of research that shows that mortality rates have fallen steadily since the ratio mandate was passed.
Yeah. And people were saying that, this is unsustainable. Like you said, California's been doing it for almost 20 years now, and it's completely working for them. And matter of fact, California has one of the best teaching universities of the University of San Diego. is a great medical facility, and they made it work with all this people complaining that no, it's gonna bankrupt the system. They make it work. Just other states has got to step up and kind of not think about the short-term income and just look at
the long-term picture. 1,000%. And I think if you guys look at hospital rankings, UCLA and Cedars-Sinai are really high up there. So these hospitals wouldn't be doing well. Obviously, there's more than just patient ratios that come into play, but these hospitals are making it work, like you said.
Did you notice something different that these hospitals are doing compared to the one at Northwestern or just healthcare in Illinois in general? That's a difference that you've really noticed?
In general, or with the ratios?
Let's just say with ratios, with the way they take care of their coworkers, any kind of factors that you notice a different change that creates better working environment, a less stress on you.
For sure. So I think with Northwestern, they do have, I think, a staffing committee. So there are these general guidelines with staffing, but they don't have to be enforced, right? By law, if I am supposed to have 4 patients on a pulmonary step down, which I think is already kind of dangerous because you have 4 vents or trachs on night shift, right? The day shift gets 3, so there's this assumption that night shift is less work, so they give you 4. And then a nurse calls, we're short-staffed, and you're already at 5. But then if someone calls out, I've 1,000% have had 6 patients before. So you go from 4 to 6. It's a big deal. I think it makes a huge difference. Even just that 5th patient can mess up your whole night, right? So I think in California, it's just nice because by law, you cannot take I work on a surgical stroke step down now. So by law, you cannot take more than 3. So if we are just short a nurse and UCSD can't supply us another nurse through full pool, we will just block off the room. And that's something Northwestern would never do.
Wow.
So you just don't take the patient. They will get sent to another hospital, or they will find a unit for that patient to go to. And I think that's huge. And I think they can't even pull our resource nurse, because our resource nurse doesn't take patients. They only cover breaks. So another thing that California has that we don't have is we have a charge nurse and a resource nurse that don't take patients. Their sole responsibility is to help you and cover your patients while you're on break. And we didn't have that. And we have a resource nurse every shift. So they can't even pull our, even if we're short staffed, they can't be like, oh, your resource nurse will take patients. No, because by law, every nurse has to have their break. So the resource has to cover breaks. And they get paid the same. It's not like the resource gets paid any less. It's nice. And I think that changes, it's a game changer.
Yeah, just the fact of, imagine like being on like our units here in Chicago. Just imagine having like a resource nurse. You know, with even though the acuity is still kind of unfair having 4 patients or whatever, but just the fact that having a resource nurse that where you can actually take a full break and just leave and kind of just zone out for a little bit. You know, that offers like a lot of benefit as well. You know, you don't gotta hire 2 more staff nurses. You know, how about we just start with having 1 relief nurse for every unit.
Right.
That'll help out so much. You know,
and like you said, with the productivity, right, over 12 hours, the productivity curve kind of tends to sway away like after 8 hours of working. So with that break is major. I feel like I recharge on my break. So in California, a big difference is, right, in Chicago, you just kind of ate when you could, or sometimes you didn't eat. And in California, depending on the unit. So when I float to the west side, which is a med-surg side, we do our break all together at once. So we get hour 15 minutes. But when I'm on the east side, which is surgical, it's a little more intense, the surgical step down. So it's hard to cover someone's patients for a whole hour 15. Okay. So we split into 2. I get a 30-minute break, which I usually eat my lunch on, and then a 45-minute break, which I'll like nap on. And it just changes everything.
Yeah, it's a game changer. Yeah, the studies show that, like, you know, having a break in between like your work schedule, you know, that also boosts productivity. And as nurses, like, I've taken more breaks in California during my 8-week assignment than I did my 2.5 years of nursing in
Chicago.
Illinois. That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
And I did the same thing. I was just taking naps, and like people don't realize. So like it's not only emotional abuse. Sometimes you're on the clock, like thinking, like what's up with your patients, vital signs, blood pressure.
You're constantly on. There's no off switch.
Yes, and you have this anxiety that's always, it's like this racing mind, and eventually it puts a toll on us, man. And it's nice to kind of take that break where here we're taking a lunch break, but our mind is still on the patient. Like if I'm eating lunch in the break room and I hear alarm, I'll step outside and look what's going on. Here you have that, they're called a relief nurse or...
The resource nurse.
The resource nurse. She takes care of your patient, and you literally have no anxiety, no stress.
Right.
You're being mindful and enjoying what you have, and psychologically, that makes such a difference.
Huge, and I'm glad you brought that up because at Northwestern, I would have my phone with me, and the call lights were linked to our phone. So I don't even think I ever, in my entire 2 years there, that I ever had one lunch where my phone didn't go off. So your lunch is broken up, so there's no mindfulness. Yeah. You're constantly thinking about the patient, constantly hearing alarm, event alarm, a call light, right? But in California, you can go outside of the hospital, you can leave the unit, you give your phone up to the resource nurse, and you give the resource nurse report. It's just huge. I think nurses are generally happier, and I think California is able to retain their nurses more because of that.
Yeah, and there was also studies that are linking, for example, anything that we do mentally, if we're not very conscious of it, it's starting to link to different mental diseases, and it's starting to link to diseases in general. Like our heart coherence is different if we have anxiety and things like that. And
I always say stress kills.
It does, literally. And you can even tell when I was taking care of a patient and like her daughter was kind of like creating anxiety into her. Like she was making it seem like everything is always something wrong. And that patient was like in the 130s, 140s, AFib. The freaking family member leaves, the heart rate is just 108, 109, just nice and calm.
Isn't it crazy that your own stress can cause like physiological effects? Yes. I went with my sister to a doctor's appointment last week, and she has a huge needle phobia. Okay. And she panicked so much that she gave herself a vasovagal reaction. She like turned pale. The whole like mechanical hospital chair was covered in sweat, and she fainted because your blood pressure drops so low that your brain can't get enough blood, and then you just faint. So if you can cause yourself that much stress in one sitting to like cause your blood pressure to plummet, it's just crazy to think about what long-term stress can do to you.
And imagine that 36 hours week on, constantly as a nurse,
Over.
getting that stress. What are the side effects of that and the long-term effects? Like, I don't think there's any studies on it, but I'm just curious what's that going to lead to.
Well, we could say that there's definitely a mind-body connection. Like another example for this would be my coworkers. I think it was his brother-in-law. He's just getting married and he just bought a house, and no prior cardiac history, nothing of any sort that we know of. And he just became, one day he was telling me he became diaphoretic, couldn't breathe, shortness of breath. And then he comes in to the doctor, he makes him wear a heart monitor for a week. A week later, I'm not sure what kind of birth it was. I'm not sure if he was in like AFib or what. We didn't get into all the detail because he wasn't exactly sure. His brother didn't tell him the full story. But now he needs a pacemaker. And this was all triggered by the stress of the wedding and the stress of moving. And imagine how much stress nurses have. Yeah, imagine how much stress nurses are if you have a patient that suddenly goes into respiratory distress, and you have 3 family members in a room. So now you're dealing with the patient and you're also dealing with the family. If the family's crying, and this guy's going into cardiac arrest, you're trying to get the family out, you're trying to do compressions. It's a super stressful. Just unfortunately, we have a career and we're so young that we literally see people die. I never in my life thought I'd be in my 20s, seeing somebody die
or wrapping someone up in a body bag. Yeah.
Most people out there in society, when they see dying, it's usually like a family member that dies maybe once every 10 years, or they see death that often. But for us, death could happen, on a daily, and it's very stressful to everybody, and it just affects our heart and especially our gut and all that. Yeah.
We had a podcast. We had a podcast episode once about how to cope as a nurse. And do you personally feel like nurses are not coping properly? I know you are very fit. You exercise, you work out, you practice mindfulness. I'm sure you're very aware of yourself, and you know how to. You have a good emotional release, right? So you don't take it home. Do you feel like other nurses do not know how to do that, and it's causing a lot of stress in their life?
I'm sure. I think it's coupled by a lot of things, right? Kids at home, relationships. It's one thing to be stressed at work, but then if you're stressed at home, something's got to give. It's just too much. It could be. I think coping with stress is something that isn't talked about enough.
Even ratios themselves, it's like this invisible war that people don't know, and I feel like the general public should be more aware of this, and they should be, we're the most trusted profession, right? As nurses, people should hear our little cry out to the world where we need this, through legislation. Maybe can it happen on a federal level possible? We could have staffing ratios. We need to have somebody elected that's willing to stand up for nurses, in the healthcare system.
Everyone, right? No matter who you are in this world, you are one day going to have a family member who's in the hospital, or who has to seek some kind of medical care. There's no ands ifs or buts about it. So you, as a person, want your family member to receive the best care that they can, and that starts with patient ratios. I'm sorry, but mandated patient ratios is important. That AHA, the American Hospital Association, can want to oppose them all they want because they're going to say they're ineffective, or it's too much cost to hire all these new nurses. And there's already a nursing shortage in America, right? So I kind of understand where they're coming from, but at the end of the day, it's just a business for them, and plain and simple, they just don't want to put the money. We can cut costs all the time with cheaper Foley kits or cheaper supplies. I'm always getting to a hospital, I'm like, oh, we have a new Foley kit. Oh, this time we have a new latex gloves. What's going on? We're trying to cut costs every which way possible in the hospital. And you're right, we want faster turnover. We want patients, shorter hospital stays per patient, right? There's whole committees that study this per hospital, what's the average time a patient stays in your hospital, and you're ranked based on that. So if we're going to try cutting costs and saving money every which way possible, it sounds so counterintuitive to me to not hire more nurses for better patient safety and patient care and less mortality rates, because at the end of the day, yes, hiring nurses is going to cost millions per hospital. It is. But you're going to save money with all the less mistakes that will be made. And you're going to retain money because you're going to retain nurses. At the end of the day, the reason Northwestern has such a high turnover rate is because they know they're the #1 hospital in Illinois, so they're not going to, it's a business. They function as a business. They're not going to pay the most, but they're not going to pay the least. And people will work for them just for the name on the resume. I mean, I'll be honest, that's why I work for them. So I did it for the name, and I got it, and I left there's such a high turnover on every unit there, and it just, you're seeping out money by having to reorientate all these new
Yep.
hires all the time. So if you can retain nurses who are happier and you have mandated patient ratios, at the end of the day, it's just going to save money for everyone.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of times you just hear like cost cutting, but we're cutting costs here, but where is that money going to that
Mm-hmm.
we're like who's getting reimbursed for this? It's obviously not us, the nurses.
No,
it's
no.
not. It's not the physicians. Like I'm sure certain surgeons get like a little kickback, you know, for
Mm-hmm.
doing certain surgeries. But you know, we always hear cost cuttings, and then you know, we notice that the state comes in and we're not hitting our numbers.
Right.
So you know, we cut costs, and now we're gonna blame nurses. What are the nurses doing wrong? How can we change the nursing care? You know, to make our numbers better. Well, an easy solution is, you know, better patient ratios. You know,
For sure.
People just don't
And do you guys
understand
always
that.
get like talks like at this once a month or every couple weeks, like this is the language we now have to use for patients because
Yes.
patient satisfaction scores. I mean, this could be a whole nother podcast, but truly patient satisfaction scores drive me zonkers
Right.
because 9 out of 10 times the patient is going to remember what went wrong and
Yep.
not what went right. So that one call light that you took 10 minutes to answer because you didn't give them their apple juice, but you were doing compressions in the next room, they're going to remember that. Or you have cable, but you're missing the one channel I want. That's the stuff they remember. They don't remember like especially where I work at UCSD, a lot of the patients are medically illiterate, honestly. Like they don't have the medical knowledge. They understand that we're implementing and that they're doing better, but they don't understand the progression of change or what would have happened had we not intervened. So these patients that I don't think a hospital is customer service. I'm sorry, I just don't think. But that's like a whole nother topic. And people keep asking me, would you come back to Chicago now that you've been home for a month visiting? Like, do you miss it? Would you ever come back to work here? Like my family keeps asking me, all my friends want me back. I was like, I love Chicago, but I can't come back. I don't think I can do nursing. Now that I know what it is on the other side, I don't think I could come back to it knowing how it was and how stressful it was and the no breaks and no support. And also the money at the end of the day, like it's just so sad that Chicago, like Illinois and all these other states haven't caught up to California.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate too. And outside of California too, like I feel like the staff and management had your back more in California with patients. You know, like I say, a patient would act out. I feel like other nurses and management will kind of get your back. They'll kind of try to tackle the patient. You know, trying to calm him down and trying to, you know, help you out. But I feel like here in Chicago, it's more like a patient, you know, has a complaint. They go with whatever the patient says, and it's kind of my fault, you know, because of the patient satisfaction scores. You know, you gotta make the patient
What
happy.
the customer says is right.
Right, you're like, yeah, you can make the patient happy, but if I'm miserable, like, what the hell? Like, I'm your nurse. Like, I'm the one that comes in here every day.
Back me
Exactly.
up. Yeah, I agree.
I feel like we don't do that enough here because everyone's like scared for some reason. But I feel like since California's more union based, all the nurses are more like geared together, more strong, and work together.
Stronger as a team.
Exactly.
I wonder if we're able as a state to push for that. Like, how does that work? Do you push for unions at a hospital level, or can you push that like on a legislative level?
You could probably do both because there's union hospitals here in Illinois.
University of Chicago being one of them. Yeah. And that's another gosh, I feel like this is going to be a rant on Northwestern, and I didn't want this to go that way. But another problem is that at Northwestern, the CNAs were union, but not the nurses.
Interesting.
So anytime there was like a little tiff between the CNAs or nurse, management 9 times out of 10 would take the CNA's position because they were backed by union. And nurses are disposable. When you're not union, you're disposable. You can be fired and they will find a new nurse.
And the fact that unions have like a union book, like a union book is your guideline. This is what you can do. With nurses, you know, there's a union book in California for nurses. What nurses are exactly responsible for. Here there isn't. Like I get in trouble for anything, and I can basically kind of do anything I want here as well. It's kind of a little bit looser. Like you get a little bit more freedom here in ICUs than over there. Everything's more by the book over there. But like I said before, like they got your back. Here, it's a very loose term for nursing. We're not 100% sure what we can exactly do and what we can't compared to union nurses where they have a strict guidelines. And same with like you were saying, the CNAs have a run out guide of what they could do. They could easily be like, hey, no, this is not what I'm responsible for. It's not in my union book.
I'm pretty sure they also could do like a obscure number of tasks an hour. So I remember one time one of my CNAs being like, I can only do 8 tasks an hour. I'm like capped. I'm like, it's 20 minutes into the hour.
Right, yeah.
So do you think
Chill.
it's harder to delegate? Did you have delegation issues?
1,000%. I would be like,
Wow.
my CNAs in Cali are amazing, and they're very proactive. Anything I need help with, there's never any fight back. It's just kind of like, sometimes they'll be like, you know what, I can't do it right now because I have XYZ going on, but I will get to it. And in Chicago, guys, I would like go find CNAs in the break room, be like, hey, room 12.
Or you wouldn't find them at all, you know?
Yep. And I'd be like, hey, room 12, like, I'm not asking much of you. I'm just asking, they have to go shower. Like, can you take off their their leads from their telemonitor and help them? And they're like, Jake, my neck is really hurting right now. I'm like, girl, why'd you come and work? But again, I love CNAs. I think our job would be impossible without them. I think they're a huge help. It just does make a difference. It does make a difference when CNAs are unionized and nurses aren't. Either like they should all be unionized or none of them should be.
Yeah, I feel like all or nothing approach.
And it's also where the union also the drawback with the union, it's an amazing thing, right? It protects us as the person working for the company, but there's also it doesn't weed off the lazy people, because the lazy people could stay because the union protects them, and those are the people that are like, well, I did my 8 tasks, for this hour, and I'm already maxed out. I'm sorry, Jake.
Yeah,
do it yourself.
crazy.
Like, that is very petty.
You can't get paid for the next 30 minutes if you're gonna just say on computer, right? Yeah, so it's just crazy. But I don't know, what differences did you guys feel like you saw in California? Were you guys generally happier?
I was definitely happier. The only thing that I was upset about was just floating.
Right.
But that's
that just is based on contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as long as sometimes, like with my contract, of course, and there's in fine print that you will be the first to float if they need you to. But my unit always needed people, so I rarely floated. I think twice during the 9 months I was there. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like back in California, I definitely got more support. I was more relaxed at work, not as tense as I am here, because like there was union book, and I think, but also got patient with less acuity just because I was traveling, and it's also a liability issue. Because I understand that, if they don't give me the proper teaching and they give me a very acute patient, I could, be like, hey, you guys never tell me this, and now this patient's suffering. And now my license is online, so I'm going to come back at you guys. So I understand that I got probably not as a high acuity assignment, but I still felt like I got more support there than I ever got here. Yeah. And I don't know, units over there, I didn't feel like it was very niche-y. But then we were only there for 8 weeks, so I probably didn't get the full feel for the unit.
And you're also a guy, and that's another thing we could touch about that. I feel like the women will approach you differently compared to if it's a girl traveler, or sometimes you see on the Facebook groups, and these travel nurses that are women are getting abused by the nurses that are staffed there, and that's an issue. And I personally I had a good experience. I'm down for another one. I just don't know if that's a dynamic that we can't see the other spectrum, because we're all males here technically, right? So
Jake, you being a male, do you feel like you get treated differently compared to your female counterparts?
This is a good question. I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah. I do think men in nursing are very important. I think it's great that we're breaking the mold. I think from a physical standpoint, it's great. I don't think women can't do anything that we can't. But it's also awesome to have extra set of hands, or sometimes with the bigger patients, it's nice to have I know some of my girlfriends at work will be like, hey, Jake, can you help us lift? You know what I mean? It's just nice to have. At the end of the day, I don't know if I get treated differently. I don't think I've ever been treated differently. And I also don't think the only time I've ever had an issue was in clinical during labor and delivery, for religious purposes, they didn't want to have a male nurse. But otherwise, I've never had a problem. And I get that question a lot from my followers, and people are like, I'm male, you've really inspired me going into nursing. Do you think I'll have any problems with it? And I don't think so. Do you guys?
Have you ever had a patient where they told you they don't want you I've had an issue where I had to go get a tech or another nurse to take my patient to the bathroom, or to do that because I'm a male and they don't like me, or
that
want
happens.
me to.
Yeah, and as long as you have good camaraderie with your staff, it shouldn't be an issue, right? I mean, you can still take care of the patient if the only request that they have is to have a female to go bathroom, and that's fine. And then if my female counterpart is helping put my patient on a bedpan, I can go help with one of her patients, and you just kind of trade off, or you help each other.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't see myself being treated differently, but my coworkers would tell me, be like, yeah, the doctor usually a dick, but he's nice to you because you're a guy. Which is okay, but I mean, he's been a dick to me before. It's not just that I'm a guy. But I mean, have you been called doctor before by your patients? Yeah. That happens to me quite a few times.
Yeah, which is sad, because I feel like there's a ton of females who are in medicine right now who are doctors, and it's just sad that people just generalize females to nursing, males to doctors,
Yes.
right? It doesn't matter at this
What
point.
about, like, have you ever had a family member where they had issues having a male nurse, where they didn't want a male nurse at all?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happened to me before.
The only time I really noticed
and then
it
you just
was-
switch.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, no, and then you go to your charge and you switch patients. Which
Yeah,
is
yeah, same for the most part.
And another question that we have regarding the IVF fertility reproductive nurse. So can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm just wondering about like your workflow and how much different it is compared to being a staff nurse at a PCU unit or ICU or
Right.
anywhere else.
So it's pretty much worlds apart, and that's the best part about nursing, right? People always ask me, should I become a nurse? What do you love about it? And I always say my favorite things are you can move to any city in America and you will get a job. You will always have a job because people are always going to get sick, right? And you will never get bored, because if you get bored with a PCU after 2 or 3 years, you can move on to something at a clinic. You could become a teacher. You could become an educator. There are just so many. The like options are limitless. You could go from peds to cardiac to ICU. There's just so much. And so I think the pulmonary step down was kind of wearing me out. I wanted to try the Monday through Friday thing. So I did IVF, and I was the first male nurse that Northwestern's IVF clinic ever hired.
Wow.
Congrats.
Thank you.
You got a plaque on the wall?
I know, right? I wish. So it was kind of a trial. It was a test trial period, and it worked out really well. And that is actually a good point talking about people who don't want males. So I had to do something called IUIs, which are intrauteral insemination. So prior to a woman starting in vitro and all the IVF medications, a lot of insurance companies will require you to do at least 6 months of 6 IUIs.
Okay.
3 to 6. So what IUIs are is the man will give his sperm, the lab will wash it, and instead of them doing it naturally, you will open the woman's vagina with a speculum, and then you find the cervix. The cervix is like a donut with a little hole in the middle, and every woman's cervix goes a different pathway, and you can't see it, right? Because you don't have laser vision. So you have the tube of sperm, and then you have a long plastic catheter, and you kind of just figure out which way it goes, and then you shoot the sperm in, and it's like a direct way of pretty much being able to get someone pregnant. And we can tell based on ultrasound in a woman's lining when they're about to ovulate, so we can tell a woman when they're supposed to come in and when we have to do these IUIs. So part of my job there was doing, like, I didn't have there was a lot of more paperwork and more scheduling patients on meds and meeting with patients for patient histories, but part of it was doing IUIs, and there were some women who were uncomfortable. Again, not a lot, like maybe 1 per every 100. So it was just like one woman because of a religious thing, and she'd be like, I really don't want you doing my IUI, or like, I'm really close with my husband, it seems weird to have a guy do it. But it was a great experience. I don't know, I loved it. The women loved me, I loved them. It was great. I can say like I've gotten more people pregnant than all my friends combined. Like people would like when blood pregnancy tests would come back, and my other nurse coworkers would like, you can always check who did the IUI in Epic, and they'd be like, Jake, you did it, and she's pregnant, and like, and the whole like you all cheer in like the nursing room. But it's cool. It was more of a happy type of nursing, because like it's still sad, and some women have really heartbreaking stories, and fertility is a huge problem nowadays, and I think it's sad in a different way, but it's also very happy because you're helping give life versus seeing it taken away on a unit.
Yeah, it's cool to get that perspective, because I've never ventured out of the hospital setting, and I've never even heard of the field you went to before until you told me today. So it's actually really cool. I never knew that existed.
It's super cool.
What's the success rate for the IVF treatment? Like, is there like a ratio, or what do you usually tell, like, for example, the patient?
Gosh, I don't want to be quoted because I've been removed from it so long, but it's pretty low. Yeah. But women do have successes. So after, say, 6 IUIs, we know something's not working, right? And it could be male fat. And the thing is, a lot of people love to stigmatize and blame fertility on women, but 30% of the time it's actually male factor.
Interesting.
And so a lot of women take that burden on themselves, being like, I couldn't get pregnant for all these years, but in reality, it's the man.
It's the guy.
But we test both spouses. But the cool thing, after 6 IUIs, we'll say, you know what, we've tried this for 6 months. We've done the intrauterine insemination. It's not working. We're going to try IVF. And so what's cool about IVF is that women only release one follicle. You have 2 ovaries, but one follicle on your ovary just grows larger than all the other ones once per month. And that's when women ovulate, right? So what we do is we kind of press pause on that one, and we give you meds to stimulate your ovaries, both of your ovaries, to swell, and you grow a bunch of follicles. And we do ultrasounds every morning, and then once you have enough that are 18 millimeters or greater, which equals mature, we will go in, they will go in, we have a procedure room in the back, the doctor will go in with this needle, and like this little needle like goes into your ovary and literally sucks out your eggs. And then we take the eggs and we artificially inseminate them in the lab with your partner's sperm. And then you start a whole new round of meds to get your body ready for the placement of that embryo. Wow. And sometimes it takes, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, people will spend all this money and you have an embryo and it won't take. And what people don't realize about miscarriages is that sometimes your body just knows that the baby is growing wrong, or one of the chromosomes isn't aligned wrongly, so your body will just kill it off on its own. So there's no explanation for why sometimes women have miscarriages. It's just your body knows better than you do. So there is a success rate, but it's by a lot of factors. Like, it's based on age. And there's something called AMH, which most women don't know about, which is anti-Mullerian hormone. So I always tell my girlfriend, like my girlfriends who are my age, in their 20s, I always tell them, go get a blood test if you're concerned about it. It's literally a simple blood test. It's called AMH. And if you're over 1.0, it can't tell you the quality of your eggs, but can tell you the quantity.
Have you noticed that if, like, I'm sure you get women that have been on birth control previously, right? Have you noticed that if someone's on birth control for a certain amount of years, it's harder to get pregnant from? Do you know anything about that?
I haven't noticed that, no.
Okay. Okay. I was just curious, for anybody out there that's on birth control.
Let's bounce into travel nursing a little bit. What's like your favorite location? Why do you like it? Or what assignments have you done?
Yeah.
Do you recommend people to travel, and where are you going next?
Okay. So I moved to San Diego back in the fall, and I've been there ever since. I resigned 3 times. I intended to resign once, because if you're offered an extension, it always looks good for your next placement, because it means the hospital liked you enough to ask you to stay, and you're loyal enough to stay for more than one assignment. So it's always very appealing to other hospitals as a traveler. So to all of my travelers out there, you don't have to do this, but I would recommend maybe extending one time, just because it shows other hospitals that you're willing to stay and that you were a good nurse, right? So I've been in San Diego. People joke and say that San Diego is where travel nurses come to die, because most people start traveling on the east and make their way west. I just went straight west, and now I don't know that I can go back east because I love it so much, So it's been my favorite place. It's been my only place. Unfortunately, I probably will go back into travel nursing at some point. I don't know when, but I think I would like to do like Hawaii or San Francisco at some point.
So you said you're going back to like San Diego, is that what you mentioned? So is that not through a travel nursing agency still? Right.
So I just finished my last contract. I did 9 months of travel nursing, and now I'm going to sign on permanently.
Okay, so permanently there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congrats. So you really like the place then. You just want, for those that know, if you want to test out different cities, you can do that. And then if you really like it and they like you, they'll just take you in like one of them, right?
1,000%. Yeah, I helped knowing the manager and everything. So as soon as the listing opened, I just shot email, and they're like, we'd love to keep you.
Wow. Yeah. When you started travel nursing, what do you think was like the hardest part? Was it like finding housing, or was it trying to, make friends on the unit, or just the unit itself?
I got really lucky with housing. My best friend's aunt had a house in San Diego that I rent. So that was just pure luck. I think making friends in a new city. So I had 2 hospitals at the same time. One was in LA and one was in San Diego, and I have way more friends in LA. I ultimately chose San Diego because I wanted to challenge myself as a person, to step outside my comfort zone. I grew up in Chicago, where I knew everyone, and I went to high school, and then my high school friends were my college roommates, and my college friends were my current friends. So I just really was like, you know what, you've kind of had it easy this whole time. Let's try to see if you can make it in a new city.
So you literally stepped out of your, comfort zone, your little bubble that you had with your friends, and you just you took everything in, job, work, living.
I mean, I didn't know a single person moving to San Diego, a single one. And so I think my first 3 months was challenging. Yeah, I think in my first 3 months I was kind of like, shoot, maybe I will finish this contract and go to LA. And I remember jumping on the phone with one of my friends who was also moving to LA at the time from San Francisco. And I was like, do you want to get an apartment together? And of course, selfishly, he could have been like, you know what, let's do it. I'm moving, you're like one of my really good friends, let's do it. But he was a good friend and he was like, you're taking away from what you told me you wanted to accomplish, which was to step outside of your comfort zone. So if you're going to leave after 3 months, you're just kind of quitting. Right. And so that contract ended in January. I came home for like 4 days just to see my family because I didn't get to come home for Christmas or Thanksgiving. So because I worked those holidays. So I went back right after I took my second contract in San Diego. I went back, and my first day back, I was like, I need to text people and make friends. And now I have some of the friends I have there are some of my greatest friends. Yeah.
And what would be like the best tip that you would give to someone that's just starting out travel nursing?
I think just be flexible. I think as nurses we already are pretty flexible. We're asked so much. We have to adapt to units. We have to flow all the time. So I think if you can just go in with an open mind and be open to meeting people, you'll be fine. And the best part about nursing is that you're like fighting war through the trenches together. So when I go to night shift, I'm bond with my coworkers so much because you're really just trying to make it to the next morning. And like through that friendship, not every person's going to jive with each other, right? There's some nurses that don't like me and I don't like them, or we just don't jive, and that's okay. That's going to happen through life no matter what. But you will find friends, and it might not just be with your nurse coworkers. There will be other travelers on the unit, and then through them you just kind of branch out and meet people. So if you're open-minded and you're willing to accept change, and change is good, right? Ultimately, I think change is good.
We don't like change sometimes. We like comfort so much. That's why that's awesome that you took on that experience where you wanted to step out the comfort zone. Not a lot of people like that, and that's why a lot of people are hesitating to do travel nursing.
Right. So, because people think that you'll get lonely, right? And it's possible if you're
Have you felt that person, like you being out there alone for like the first month or two, not finding anybody?
Yeah, for sure. 1,000%.
Just having like withdrawals from your friends?
Yeah, and so like coming from San Diego is a little bit of a smaller city, right? And so in Chicago, I live downtown. So even in the middle of the week, there was always something going on. You can find someone or something to do. San Diego it can be a little sleepy during the week. So, and with a nurse's schedule, we don't always work a consistent, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so if you're off on a Tuesday, Wednesday, but your people are working, you kind of find yourself like in your own head. But there's ways around that.
Okay. Anything you else want to add on before we kind of wrap up the show?
No, just thank you guys for having me. You guys are great.
Awesome. So where can we find you, Jake, if anybody wants to follow or get in touch with you, see more of your life or your travel experience?
Thank you. My Instagram is @Jake Grez, so JakeGrez.
And we'll add that in the video and for him. So, guys, whoever watches, whoever's been on this show and listening for over 50 minutes, thank you guys. It's a longer form. We're excited to have our first guest, and moving forward, we'll have guests. We're just getting into the flow of things. The Travel Nurse Checklist is out if you guys want to download that for free, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.
Yep, thank you, Jay, for coming by.
Thank you, guys.
Later.